Mr. President, this week, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is bringing up the failed border bill that the Senate already rejected in February, all in a political ploy to give vulnerable Democrat senators up for re-election camouflage to hide their real views on the border. That failed border bill is nothing but a fig leaf that pretends to do something about border security, but wouldn't actually secure the border. In fact, if it became law, it would make the problem worse. This Democrat bill would codify catch and release. It would put into federal law Joe Biden's policy of releasing illegal aliens into this country. That is the cause of the open border crisis we have right now. It would normalize 5,000 illegal immigrants a day. That works out to 1.8 million illegal immigrants a year, every year, year after year, forever. It would provide immediate work permits to illegal aliens when they cross the border illegally. And it would provide many of them with taxpayer-funded lawyers. Not only is the bill, by design, utterly ineffective at securing the border, it is designed to fail. In fact, we can quantify mathematically the chances this bill has of passing the House of Representatives. And those chances are 0.00%. There is, however, a bill that we know would actually secure the border and would do so right now. It would put real penalties in place to end catch and release and to defund the NGOs that are a critical part of the human trafficking network. That bill is H.R. 2, and H.R. 2 has already passed the House of Representatives. I'm proud to lead H.R. 2 here in the Senate. If the Democrats want to do the responsible thing that would actually secure the border, we would pass H.R. 2. But instead, the Democrats deliberately want this border crisis to continue. Every single Democrat member of this body, and we know this because every one of them has voted over and over and over again against policies to actually secure the border. When Joe Biden came into office, he inherited the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. All President Biden had to do was nothing. Just don't screw it up. But instead, he deliberately broke the system. He made 3 decisions his first week of office that caused this crisis. Number 1, he immediately halted construction of the border wall. Number 2, he reinstated the disastrous policy of catch and release, the policy the Democrats now want to put into federal law. And number 3, he pulled out of the incredibly successful Remain in Mexico agreement. The Remain in Mexico agreement is what had produced the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. And what happened? We went from incredible success at securing the border to immediately the worst illegal immigration in our nation's history. Over 11 million illegal immigrants have come into this country under Joe Biden and the Democrats. It is an invasion. It is larger than the population of more than half of our states. Now, why on earth would the Democrats turn a blind eye to the people who are suffering and dying? Why would they turn a blind eye to the body bags, to the 853 migrants who died last year crossing illegally? Why would they turn a blind eye to the children being brutalized by human traffickers? Why would they turn a blind eye to the women being sexually assaulted by human traffickers? Why would they turn a blind eye to the more than 100,000 Americans who died last year of drug overdoses? Why would the Democrats turn a blind eye to the families, to the children being murdered by illegal immigrants that Joe Biden is releasing? The answer, sadly, is that they see every one of these 11 million illegal immigrants as future Democrat voters. And it's a cynical decision that in order to stay into power, it's fine for people to suffer and die. In just a moment, I'm going to propound a unanimous consent request to take up and pass H.R. 2. When I do so, we'll have a moment of decision. All the Democrats have to do for this to pass is nothing. Just like Joe Biden, all Joe Biden had to do at the beginning of his presidency to not break the border was nothing. Just keep in place the policies that were working. When I asked for unanimous consent to pass this bill, if the Democrats do nothing, it will pass the Senate and go immediately to President Biden's desk, and he could sign it into law. But I'm going to predict right now we're going to hear two magic words from the Democrats. We're going to hear the words, "I object." Because they object to securing the border. They object to stopping this invasion. They object to standing up to the cartels. They object to protecting the American people. But before I do that, I want to yield to my colleague from Kansas, Senator Marshall.
Mr. President.
Senator from Kansas.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to thank the Senator from Texas for leading the charge up here to secure our border. Since day one, Joe Biden's allowed the cartels to have operational control of our nation's border, exploiting every weakness and pushing deadly fentanyl into our communities, killing over 300 Americans every day. I rise today to join my colleague in calling for unanimous consent for H.R. 2, the Secure Our Borders Act, which the House passed over a year ago, has set languaging here on this side of the Capitol, waiting for a hearing, waiting for a vote. Now, time after time, the President and his administration have shown us that our national security is an afterthought. We're facing unprecedented times. Under this President's watch, over 11 million illegal aliens are here now on U.S. soil. And instead of taking any real measures to address the crisis, he's doubling down. With just 6 months until the election now, the left wants you to believe they have suddenly stumbled upon a solution to the border crisis they created. In the news this week, we'll see the Democrats' bait-and-switch tactics, and I want to remind the American people to watch what the majority leader and this administration do, not what they say. They have no serious solution. They know it, and that's why it's painfully obvious that the stunts being pulled here this week are politically motivated. Americans across the heartland are feeling unsafe due to Joe Biden's worsening border crisis. Even a state like Kansas is now a border state. Fentanyl's flooding into our communities across the state, claiming a life most every day, and now is the leading cause of death among young adults in America. Joe Biden's border crisis has resulted in over 300 known terrorists being apprehended in the past year for attempting to cross the southern border. Additionally, over 35,000 Chinese nationals and thousands of individuals from countries like Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, and Syria have crossed through our southern border. We're in a sad state of affairs when our foreign adversaries are paying closer attention to our vulnerabilities at our borders than the President of the United States. Even our own FBI is sounding the alarm, now warning that because of this invasion, we're on high alert for terrorist attack in the coming months. I stand today with a clear message for this chamber. It is time to do what is right for the American people, not politically motivated messaging stunts that aren't serious or sincere to the people who have been victims of the Biden administration's lawlessness. Mr. President, we have a solution to secure our borders, a proposal that could go to the President's desk today. Let's pass the Secure Our Borders Act, H.R. 2. This legislation tightens asylum standards, it builds a wall, it increases Border Patrol agents, and it ends catch and release. It passed out of the House over a year ago, but the majority leader refuses us to take a vote in the Senate. If Senate Democrats were truly serious about securing our borders, enforcing the rule of law, and protecting our nation's sovereignty, they would stop wasting time and take up H.R. 2 today. Without secure borders, we cannot ensure our nation's safety. This national security crisis is unprecedented, and we have thoughtful, real solutions to address it immediately. Americans deserve to feel safe in their own homes. This half-baked so-called border bill is an insult to Laken Riley and her family and every other American citizen who's been victimized by crimes committed by someone who should not be in this country. Even the lead Democrat architect of the so-called border bill has said flat out this legislation does not close the border. You can quote him, "It does not close the border." That's all the American people need to hear to see how fast and loose the Democrat Party is willing to play with our national security. This is a campaign stunt for the candidates you have in battleground states who are on political life support, And no grandstanding in Washington this week will change that fact. I'd like to yield back to the senator from Texas.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, now is the moment when we will discover whether or not the Senate will pass real and strong legislation to secure the border. Again, all the Democrats have to do to send H.R. 2 to the President's desk to be able to be signed today is nothing. And so let's listen for those magic words. The two magic words that would kill this bill are "I object." Let's hear if that's what the Democrats have to say. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 71, H.R. 2. The bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object.
Is it Majority Whip?
And now for the rest of the story. Last October, President Biden had a major piece of legislation that provided assistance to Ukraine in its battle against Vladimir Putin, provided assistance to Israel, assistance to Taiwan, and a massive amount of humanitarian aid. It was bipartisan, we thought. And then the Republicans, particularly in the Senate, stepped up and said, we're not going to consider any bill like that unless you attach something to deal with our border security. Well, we said, how are we going to achieve that? They gave us a formula that they wanted. They wanted to have their lead negotiator, the Senate Republicans did, one of our colleagues, Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma. James Lankford is a certified conservative. I'm sure he'd be happy to be called that, and a person I respect a great deal. He is a man of principle, and he was in charge of negotiating on the Republican side. So they asked us, who do you want Democrats to negotiate with? We said Chris Murphy of Connecticut and Kirsten Sinema, an independent Democrat from Arizona. The three of them went to work in October of last year, and they worked on this for weeks, months, went back and forth, and it looked many times like it was hopeless. We couldn't reach an agreement. And lo and behold, they did. They came up with a bill that massively changed the way we manage the border. And they brought it to the White House, and they said to Joe Biden, in this bipartisan bill, will you support it? And he said, I will. So we had a perfect formula, a bipartisan bill in a Congress with a Democratic Senate and a Republican House, and a President of the United States who says, I'll sign it. So what happened next? That's the best part. They went and asked the Republicans, many of the Republicans didn't take yes for an answer because we had this bipartisan bill, the architect being the Republican senator of their choice. They decided to ask one man whether they should go forward. Want to guess who it was? Donald Trump. Donald Trump said, no, I'm sorry, I don't want to see this issue go away. I want to be able to work on this issue as part of my presidential campaign in the year 2024. So I'm telling you right now, stop that bill, stop that bipartisan bill, don't vote for it. And he said, and if you want to know, you can blame me. Go ahead and blame me for stopping that bill. That's what he said, that's a quote, it's on the record, I saw him say it. And in fact, most of the Republicans, except for a handful on the other side of the aisle, then decided that the Lankford bipartisan bill was no longer acceptable because Trump said it was unacceptable. And that's what happened. And so that bill died and didn't go forward. And unfortunately, we know the reality, as I mentioned earlier, any immigration bill that has a ghost of a chance needs to be bipartisan. This bill would prohibit funding for processing individuals who arrive at our border between ports of entry. Think about that. The bill would prohibit funding for processing individuals who arrive at our border between ports of entry. This would prevent Border Patrol agents from executing their duties and essentially create an open border in between ports of entry. This bill would also dramatically limit the use of parole programs that the Biden administration and prior administrations, Republicans and Democrats, have relied on for emergencies. I'm proud to represent the city of Chicago. There's a section of that city called Ukrainian Village. It's near North. I've been there many times, been to their churches, been to their schools, been to their bakeries, as you can tell. I really like that section of Chicago, and a lot of Ukrainian Americans live there. When we decided to help the refugees from the Ukrainian war under President Biden and others, we said that we would give them an opportunity to come to the safety of the United States while the war was pending. In the city of Chicago, we estimate that 36,000 Ukrainians came to Chicago. We basically said to them, if you can find a family to sponsor you, we'll give you a work permit, and you can stay here while the conflict continues in your country. They were absorbed into the Chicago and Illinois and Midwest economy without a ripple. They're hardworking people, good people. They were accepted in the churches and the schools, and their kids went to school there, and they really contributed to the Chicago scene. They've done a great job. Well, the authority of a president like Biden to make that decision for Ukrainian refugees is removed by this bill. This authority has been relied on by the executive branch for decades in emergency situations. The evacuation of hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese allies in the 1970s and the evacuation of thousands of Iraqi Kurds in the 1990s would be eliminated by this bill. This partisan legislation, it only received Republican votes, not a single Democratic vote. This partisan legislation also includes many provisions that are completely unrelated to border security. For example, listen to this one. How about this? Want to put this in the comprehensive border bill? It would prohibit funds from being used by the Department of Homeland Security to purchase electric vehicles for the agency's law enforcement agencies. What in the heck is that all about? This bill would also impose mandatory electronic employment verification, known as E-Verify, on every sector of the American economy. I left a meeting in my office with a person representing farm workers in the state of North Carolina. Do you know what percentage are farm workers in America working today, going out and harvesting crops and fruits and vegetables? Do you know what percentage are undocumented? 50%. 50% are undocumented today. So this bill would impose mandatory E-Verify and would include the agriculture industry, and these undocumented workers, 50% of agriculture workers, would be unable to work. What would that do to our food supply chain? I can tell you it would come to a grinding halt, and it would dramatically increase food prices. Hear that, America? This provision by the junior senator from Texas would raise food prices on its own. Massive consequences for American families. This bill is so extreme that there was a bipartisan opposition to it in the House of Representatives. Under close scrutiny, this bill is simply not a serious effort to secure our border. It would harm our economy and make our country less safe and less secure. The bipartisan bill, which Donald Trump and many of the Senate Republicans killed, would have worked to move us in the right direction. We really had an opportunity to vote on this legislation. It would have actually helped us on the border. Though I had some concerns about it, I thought it was a genuine bipartisan effort I could support. I was disappointed, but hardly surprised, that the vast majority of my Republican colleagues, including the junior senator from Texas, who's making this motion today, voted against it. This bipartisan bill, with James Lankford's leadership on the Republican side, rejected out of hand by Republicans in the Senate. It's no surprise to me the junior senator did that. The only time we brought a bipartisan comprehensive immigration bill to the floor, he voted against that too. It's no surprise. This bill, written by the Senate Republicans' designated negotiator, Senator Lankford of Oklahoma, endorsed by the National Border Patrol Council, the union that represents Border Patrol agents. The Speaker of the House declared it dead on arrival in the House before the text was even released. We can only fix our broken immigration system if we do it on a bipartisan basis. Nobody gets their way around here. You have to work for compromise. It is clear that the House Republicans are unwilling to help secure the border under those terms. Instead, they want to maintain the crisis at the border to help score political points for their favorite candidate for president. Instead of a symbolic and failed effort to pass bipartisan bills that won't actually address challenges, let's work together on a bipartisan basis. Let's start with the Lankford bill. That's what the opportunity will be on the floor. If you want to change it, let's amend it. But for goodness sakes, let's start with the bill that we agreed was going to be the starting point not that long ago before Donald Trump made his pronouncement. One that supports our frontline law enforcement officials, addresses the needs of the economy, provides a path to citizenship for dreamers and immigrant farm workers, and lives up to our nation's legacy of providing safe harbor to refugees fleeing for their lives. The American people are tired of partisan bickering over immigration. They want us to work together to secure our border, support our economy, and stand by America's fundamental principles. Proudly, I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President,
Senator from Texas.
well, I'd like to say I'm surprised, but I'm not. It is worth, though, pausing to reflect both what the senator from Illinois said and what he didn't say. What he didn't say, he didn't dispute the point I made about this Democrat bill they're having a show vote on later this week. He didn't dispute that this bill codifies catch and release, that it puts into federal statute Joe Biden's lawless practice of releasing illegal immigrants when they're apprehended. He didn't dispute that. He didn't dispute that this bill would normalize 5,000 illegal immigrants a day, 1.8 million illegal immigrants a year, every year, forever. He didn't dispute that either. He didn't dispute that this bill would give illegal immigrants who are apprehended immediate work permits. Didn't dispute that. He didn't dispute that this bill would give many of them taxpayer-funded lawyers, and he also didn't dispute a point I've made many other times, although I didn't just make it, that it would give billions of dollars to the NGOs that are part of the human trafficking network, that it would fund the people trafficking millions into this country. He didn't dispute any of that. Instead, he said the standard Democrat line, which is Trump, Trump, Trump. Trump is the bad guy. It's all Trump's fault. And I get in Democrat circles, Trump is the boogeyman. But there's a simple fact. When Donald Trump was in the White House and when he was actually working to secure the border, we had the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. When Joe Biden and the Democrats are in charge, we have the highest rate of illegal immigration in American history. That is a fact. And all the political smoke and mirrors from the Democrats can't hide that fact. But there's also interesting what he did say. He gave these epic words about Chicago welcoming immigrants. And he's right. Our country was built by legal immigrants, by people following the law, coming here the right way. My father came as an immigrant from Cuba. There is a right way to come following the rules. I found it striking, though, that when he was saying how much Chicago loves illegal immigrants, that he somehow omitted that the mayor of Chicago has declared an emergency because of the crisis of illegal immigrants flooding into the city of Chicago. Illegal immigrants taking resources from the residents of Chicago, being housed in Chicago O'Hare Airport. We're seeing illegal immigrants in places like New York City being put in public schools and throwing Americans out of their facilities. The mayor of New York City, again a liberal Democrat, like the mayor of Chicago, has said illegal immigration is a crisis that is destroying New York City. And yet, Senator Durbin told us, in essence, the Democrats are the party of open borders. He said, farm workers, we can't get anyone to work on the farm unless we have those open borders. Apparently, in the Democrats' view, Americans are lazy and don't want to work, and the only way to grow our food is to open our borders to a full-on invasion. And listen, if some people have to die, if people have to get murdered by criminals and gangbangers released by Democrats day after day after day, that's an acceptable price to the Democrats. Because if you listen to his criticism of H.R. 2, you know what he said? Well, the people who are here illegally, they wouldn't be able to work. My God, it would stop illegal immigration. That is his objection. That is the Democrats' objection. They object to this bill because it would do what they say they want to do. And the truth is they don't want to do that. Joe Biden could secure the border today. He broke the border by unilateral action. Nothing prevents him from reversing those three decisions, from ending catch and release today. He won't do it. He doesn't want to do it. And every Democrat in this chamber supports those open border policies. I'm going to close by observing the very real victims of the Democrats' open border policies. There are some Democrat policies that are victimless. This is not one of them. We've heard a lot about Laken Riley, but it's worth reflecting on what exactly happened with her. Because the murderer that murdered her came from Venezuela illegally. And we caught him. We had him. He was apprehended in El Paso, Texas. All Joe Biden had to do was follow the law. If he'd followed the law, what would he have done with an illegal immigrant from Venezuela? He would have put him on a plane and flown him back. But he didn't do that because Joe Biden and the Democrats have decided they want open borders. Instead, they released this illegal immigrant. They let him go. Now, what did he do? He went to New York City, and we caught him again. He committed another crime. This time, he endangered the safety of a child. And New York City caught him. They arrested him. And what did New York have to do? All they had to do was follow the law and put him in jail. And you know what? If they'd done that, Laken Riley'd still be alive. By the way, if Joe Biden and the Democrats had followed the law, Laken Riley'd still be alive. But New York City is a sanctuary city, so they let him go again. And the murderer came down to Georgia. And Laken Riley, a beautiful 22-year-old woman, a nursing student, she went out jogging for what she thought was going to be a beautiful day. And this murderer, this illegal immigrant that Democrats had released over and over and over again, picked up a brick and beat her to death. Mr. President, that's happening every week. Another name you don't hear Democrats say is Jeremy Caceres. Jeremy Caceres is a beautiful 2-year-old boy. Was murdered in Prince George's County, Maryland, just a few miles from where we are right now, by another illegal immigrant that Joe Biden and the Democrats released. And I want to finally point, Mr. President, to a 15-year-old girl in your home state, in Boston, Massachusetts. Not only is the Biden administration allowing a completely open border and releasing illegal immigrants that are apprehended, but they are flying hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants directly from their home countries into America. In this case, the Biden administration flew an illegal immigrant from Haiti to Boston, Massachusetts. He didn't try to cross illegally. The Biden administration said, come on, get on an airplane, we'll bring you to Boston. And you know what he did in Boston? He's been arrested now for violently raping a 15-year-old girl with severe mental disabilities. This is sick, this is grotesque, and this is happening day after day after day. And we have a bill right now we could pass that would stop it. And the Democrats' answer is, I object. And another American is going to be killed next week, and the week after, and the week after, and the Democrats, all in the name of power, are perfectly fine with it. The good news is an election is coming. And in January 2025, with a new administration, we will solve this problem. We will secure the border. We will stop this invasion. And we'll protect the American people. I yield the floor.